Hello and welcome to episode 372 of the Crate and Crowbar. It is Friday the 4th of June 2021. My name is Chris Thurston and joining me tonight are Alex Wiltshire.
Hello.
And Tom Francis.
Hello.
We're all feeling a little bit weird because the podcast software we use does a countdown to the beginning of recording, which is a 3, 2, 1, and then any number of flashing zeros before you're allowed to begin speaking.
It was a world record tonight.
At 15 full zeros. But I find it quite charming in its way. It's as if a space shuttle launch was 3, 2, 1, hang on.
It's still plugged into the mains.
There it is. Hey!
I'd like to think that, the podcaster, the remote podcaster, he's just got a cheeky wink and looking at us going, oh, I might start now, might not. Let your takes. Ooh, got them ready.
That's
now
the voice of Zencaster, is it?
Yeah. A goblin, a cheeky goblin.
Oh, you've made it a goblin, which means I forgive it. Why does that always work? Good. Yeah. Well, by way of internet news, we should get right into it because in an unprecedented turn of events, Tom has 6 games to talk about.
It's a logjam.
I haven't been on in a while.
Right. And they just back up those takes.
Yep.
They'll come out at the same time.
My only 2 modes of existence are either I'm unable to summon the effort to play any games and I just watch TV for months on end, or I suddenly start playing games and then just can't stop playing games and play loads of different games.
It's this binging lifestyle of yours, Tom.
It's the fact that you remember enough of them to have formed opinions. Well, We'll see, I suppose. But
I can form opinions in record time.
What if you mix up your opinions?
Oh, like give a take for one game about a different game.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, if I tell you that the Mass Effect Legendary Edition just came out today and it's a great game about trading at Empire networks, then you know I've got too mixed up.
It's funny because do you do this thing, we'll get into the news, but do you do the thing where you play a game and then you realise, there's no podcast mileage here at all, and just sort of kind of, it changes the way you feel about it? Because I have that.
I think I'm too salty. I get annoyed about things really fast, and so I've always got something to grouse about. And then, a lot of these are going to be very surface level. Like Mass Effect Legendary Edition, I'm only a little way into Mass Effect 1, so it's real brief.
No spoilers. I'm joking. I played it. Because I had that recently with Monster Train, which is a game I finally played a ton of, and I had this real sneaking suspicion as I was into that's the noise I was expecting that to elicit, as I was into my maybe 10th hour with it, that I really genuinely have nothing to say about this. Tom either hasn't already said or would know more about, and therefore just wait for him to say it. So I just sort of was like, you know what, I'm playing this for me now, and immediately stopped. And that is...
You stopped because I think I have the opposite reaction, which is whenever I feel that I should play something, that's the moment at which I don't want to play it, and I kind of have this urge to play something that nobody wants me to. So it's like that. Whenever I really try to avoid writing game reviews, but when I do a review, it's even if it's a game I've wanted to play, I suddenly don't want to play it at all, and it's a real chore to boot it up. And I think that is the diametric opposite of what anyone would imagine reviewing would be like, and probably is like for most other reviewers.
It's probably like that when you start.
Yeah.
I think playing a game is at its best when it is a subversive act, and I think maybe that's a generational feeling that has gone away now. Actually, like we're not squirreling away to play Sonic or something, are we? No, we're enjoying an entertainment form that's completely acceptable.
Yeah, what's the point of that?
Exactly.
I would still like to know what you think of Monster Train, though, Chris. Just like
I really like it.
It
it's good. Yeah, I do really like it. I have really enjoyed it. I realized because like I had received so much information about it from you on the podcast that I thought I knew what it was, and then I realized that I didn't realize what
I
it
was
was
lying the whole time.
No, it's not that you were wrong. It's that I think
it's not even cards in it.
I think it's like that thing of like until you actually start to kind of grok some of those kind of deck building complexities yourself, it's very hard to transmit the fun of that to another person. You can tell them it's fun, but until you're actually in the mix of it, like this,
I think it's a really hard game to communicate, like to explain. Yeah, you could. You knew what it was, but just the experience and what you're thinking about is that'll be a shock.
I like it more than Slay the Spire. I will say that.
Interesting.
But I think there's a lot of these games that like have captured people's attentions for years at a time in some cases. That I play like a decent amount of and then get bored and wander off. But I have enjoyed. I will say this: there'll be my one take on Monster Chain, and then I'll leave it alone. I've enjoyed there being a game that, to me at least, feels wholly about conjuring horse shit. Like just reducing it. Maybe this is an opinion. Like I hadn't my time playing spent playing Slay the Spire was prior to being this deep in game dev, and I think this has arrived at a very different point in that arc for me. And now there's something about like this game is about summoning the most degenerate game state you can possibly create. That doesn't. If this was a competitive game, this would be garbage and like. And like I've rendered this game comically unlosable or comically unwinnable for myself, and I'm going to have fun watching this shake out. And I'm kind of slowly climbing the various Covenant ranks and things. I'm not massively far up, but getting there. And occasionally you get the kind of oh god, I've got to think now, or I've really got to put some thought into this thing, and then the vertigo of the possibility space stretches out below me. And I get momentarily kind of intimidated by it, but then it always kind of snaps back comfortingly into some sense of like, well, you didn't know you can combine these things to break the game, and you can, and that's good.
Yeah. The numbers are just ridiculous. I played it for like 300 hours, and I recently broke my damage record for like the most damage done by a unit in a single hit. My previous record was 4,000. My new record is 32,000. So like, when it gets out of control, it gets really out of control.
Yeah, you shared a screenshot with us all, and those the numbers were just okay. All right, yep. Okay. I don't know how you get it.
I found out there's actually a limit to how angry you can be in that game. There's a rage thing that increases your damage, and it maxes out at 999.
I think the reason these games are good is because they take all of the fun of being a complete dickhead to somebody else in Magic the Gathering and let you do that to like an unfeeling computer that will still let you come to its game night afterwards. And that is almost the entire fun, right? Like they've captured what's great about kind of combo building to a kind of a silly degree and then just let you do it in a safe environment. And that's nice.
Yeah. That's why it's my favorite genre really is. That's what I like is I want to, get really into the mechanics and find ridiculous, absurd combos, but I don't ever want to be doing it against another human being because I don't want to feel bad about doing that.
I don't know if there's a sort of a pleasure though. If in a game like this is sort of, what ifness really. But if you could do this kind of game where it's this sort of, you're laying out this track ahead of you of this sort of strange machine of different combos running into this and that and multipliers and that kind of thing, this ungainly kind of jerry-built thing. And if you're facing that and you can see it being built in front of you and just get the pleasure of that shouldn't work and it is, and I can't really counter that anymore, but just watching it in motion might that ever be entertaining to be up against? I don't know. It could just.
I think the question is it going to be more? Is it going to be more entertaining than getting to do it yourself? And I think the answer is probably not.
But if you felt that you could have, and maybe I don't know, maybe there might be a way of finding kind of intense fun that would have been frustrating?
I don't have a lot of experience with this, but with a lot of PvP games, when I have played them that have very particular builds, when I come up against a build that's just like way better than mine and destroys me, it's dispiriting because now I feel like I've just got to do that. I've just got to do what that guy did. I don't get to come up with a build. I just saw his, and his is better than mine, and so I should just copy it if it's that much better.
But in Monster Train though, like one of its strengths is that because of the wild freeness of the way that your build comes together, like you know, with experience, and I haven't really ever got there, but with experience, I guess you can kind of steer it in a certain way. But sometimes you'll kind of like feel like a little bit like a leaf blown in the wind, and sometimes it blows you to a nice place, and sometimes it doesn't. If you don't feel absolutely the architect of that, but you know that you could never have got that build, you know, and you can't achieve that build every time, and that might be a bit freeing.
I guess it's hard to imagine what the PvP version is like. Monster Train does have a multiplayer mode, but it's like competitive sort of racing against each other, trying to, do better and playing against the same run.
Yeah. And that is much more sensible way of doing it.
I think enjoying losing in the way you describe requires you to be very literate about the game and how it works and what the possibility space is. Yeah. And it's the kind of thing that like often marks your maturity as a player is I lost, but wow, that was an interesting way to lose, or that was a really fun thing my opponent did. I think it's, I'm not going to say impossible because obviously, there are very, very smart people in the world, but it feels sort of like just difficult in the way that players' experience of game systems work to beam that experience into someone's first couple of hours. Yeah. Because it's dependent on that literacy, but who knows? It's an interesting thing to shoot for, but I wonder how you shoot for it without creating a sandbox that's so complicated that players would then subsequently reduce it to its simplest components in order to beat each other up.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
And that's consensus.
What we should... Yeah, exactly. Boom. That was one bonus game agreed upon. Put it in the bin. Don't. It's nice. So we're going to talk about some news by way of just games that are nice that came out all of a sudden. One game that came out all of a sudden was Inkle's new game, Overboard.
Yeah.
Tom, I believe this is one of your half dozen.
Yep. The Francis half dozen. This was not announced until it was released. It was one of their it was a surprise launch, which I don't think they've done before, right, Inkle?
What a concept.
Yeah. No. I always think it's a terrible idea. Don't do that because some people will just miss it. But the game is good. It's a murder mystery on a ship where you are the murderer, and the murder happens in the sort of non-interactive intro, and the whole game is just how do you get away with it. And it's very much an Agatha Christie styled thing. It's you're on a cruise ship, and there's a cast of maybe 6 characters, and you are looking at a cross-section view of the ship, and you choose which place to go to, and you can see who's already there. And when you go there, you will be able to talk to them with, the standard sort of 80 days type dialogue. Except that it is massively dynamic, I guess. It's only about 15 minutes to play through once, but the whole game is about restarting it and figuring out what else you could have done to not come unstuck. Because like any good murder mystery, there is a moment where a certain character calls you all into the dining room and puts together his case as to why you killed your husband, or how that you killed your husband, why he thinks you did. And so you get to see all the evidence and whose testimony really puts the nail in your coffin, and then you go back and you do it again. You try and make sure that person either doesn't believe that or isn't in a position to testify to it, or you can cast guilt on them yourself, which is really cool. It's obviously inspired by The Last Express, which I haven't played, but I know that it's one of John Ingold's favorite games, and it is known for being kind of real time, where the NPCs are on their own schedule and they're going to go do their things whether you're there or not. And so if you want to catch them at a certain place, you have to be there at a certain time. And that's very much true here as well. Like everyone is moving around. And I've played it through 8 times, I think. and I have successfully got away with murder twice, but I haven't. I haven't figured out the real goal, which is to also be able to collect life insurance on your dead husband, which you can't do if the verdict is suicide. And so far, all I've managed to do is cast enough doubt that nobody can prove I'm the murderer, and therefore it gets ruled a suicide. But it's clear that if you could frame somebody else, or if it was ruled an accident, then you would get the money as well. And I actually, just after finishing the 8th playthrough, I was looking at the achievements because I got a bunch of funny ones. You can talk to God in this game if you go to like the prayer room at the back. You just have a conversation with God, and it's half fourth wall breaking. Like some of it is in a lot of it's in character, but you can all just ask him like, "Hey, this person's asking me for money. Is there any way to get the money? Like, is that possible in this game?" And God will kind of fuck with you. And God hates you, by the way, because you're a murderer. So he really sometimes he just swears at you and tells you to fuck off. But yeah, so I got some fun achievements for that. I got God to hate poetry, which is a fun achievement to get. And I was looking through the other achievements, and there's a lot more scope for finesse than I realized. I felt like I was, 60% of the way to sort of having this completely figured out, because all I've got to do, I've already cast a lot of guilt on someone else, and now I think I've just got to figure out how to make that conclusive. But actually, the achievements are things like there's some kind of concept of like a perfect playthrough, which means that you get away with murder, you get the full insurance payout, and you get a man. And I'm not sure what it means by that exactly. I have slept with a man in one of my playthroughs, but that didn't count as getting the man, I guess. So maybe I need to work on my romance game. But there's that, and then there's like do that in 5 hours, and then do that in 3 hours. My playthroughs are all like 8 hours long. I can think of a way you could end it earlier, but the idea that you could do all of that in 3 hours is kind of wild. So
and what's the time based on? Is sort of as you move between rooms, that kind of adds time and each conversation.
Yeah, it's not actual real time. It's based on both movement and action. If you stay in one place and you keep doing things there, time does progress, and other people will walk in. I found a way to get into somebody's cabin, and I was searching it, and I started reading her bad poetry, and I read too much of her bad poetry, and she came back and caught me. It was gripping.
And does the that dynamic nature, does that mean, how open is that dynamic stuff? Like, are you able to go in with a certain intention for a run, or do you have to react to kind of stuff that's specific?
That's the weird thing, is that a lot of it is about just not making mistakes, and there are lots of mistakes you can make. And so once you figured out not to make those mistakes, when you replay, you just need to do those same set of actions again. And it does have a feature for that where, so you can hold a button to fast forward dialogue, but you can even have it, when you're fast forwarding, choose the same choice you chose last time at each juncture. So you can really fast forward. It's scary to do because I don't entirely remember what my last playthrough was. Like sometimes I'm doing a fuck around playthrough and I'll just, try wacky things. And if that's the option, it's going to auto select this time, then I've ruined my run. And as far as freedom goes, I have found it to be, it's really like 3 choices in each situation, and they are what the writer thinks you should do, they haven't tried to cover every reasonable possibility. Like several times I found myself alone in a room with the only person who strongly believes I killed my husband, and I'm holding a massive heavy paperweight and I'm like, come on, give me the option. And it doesn't. But you can kill people. There are times that's available. So far, it's only ever come up in a situation where I'd be obviously immediately caught, so I haven't done it. But it's pretty clear to me you could probably orchestrate a situation where you can do that. And I think it's more about finding where those possibilities are rather than, think of any plan and we'll let you do it and we'll find a way for the story to react.
Sounds cool. Really cool.
Yeah. I like it. It's, I think
I'm
not really sure how it's going to feel as you keep on replaying it. At this point, I figured out a lot of stuff and I just want to get to the bits I haven't figured out. And this fast forwarding system might help with that, but I've got to get to the point where I really understand how it works well enough to know that I'm not going to fuck it up by holding that button.
Yeah. I don't understand how they've had time to make it, because they're making another game at the same time. This sort of side-scrolling, story-based game about Scotland or something. It's based in the Highlands or something, isn't it? So there's that they've been showing off lots of screenshots of that seems quite ambitious. It seems like yesterday they did the King Arthur game.
Yeah,
that
Pendragon.
Seems like it only just came out. Yeah, Pendragon. That's they're busy people. I just don't see how you can just, hey, here's an intensely dynamic narrative-driven whodunit, opposite whodunit. We're just going to toss it out, announce.
Yeah, so Pendragon
on the same day.
Pendragon came out 1 year ago, apparently.
What?
Wow.
Still though,
as of
it's impressive.
10 days' time. Yeah. I didn't know about this Highlands one.
Yeah, it's really it's lovely looking graphics. They've been talking about some of the technology they've been using in making its lovely visuals and the illustrators they've been working with and animators and things. Like it seems quite a long way ahead.
John was saying recently that like most of their games have taken about 6 months, except for Heaven's Vault, which took like 4.5 years. So there's a big variance in how long games take them.
My good pal Paul Canavan did a bunch of art for the Highlands game.
Oh, cool.
If not the art for the Highlands game, I'm not sure exactly.
Does anyone know what it's called? Because I can't find it.
It's so according to the Untitled Highland game is the last tweet I could find.
Oh, okay.
It's a lovely day in Scotland, and you are a beautiful hill.
Sounds nice.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, so I'll say this in favor of the just releasing your game when it's just announcing your game when it's done and releasing it approach is it helps them manage the narrative that would come with, hey, we're actually working on 3 games at the moment. Right?
Yeah.
Because if there's a parallel universe where they announced all this stuff at the same time, and maybe 18 months ago or a year ago or whatever, we're going like, Inkle expanded to 3 games. That seems ambitious. Let's see if it works out for them. So it's kind of nice to just be like, we did it, finished it. It's fine actually. Here you go. Do you like it? It's nice, isn't it? Bye. Like optimal, really.
It's also it's on like everything as well.
Yeah.
Simultaneous. It's on iOS, PC.
Oh, really?
I assume Switch. I don't know.
It'd be good on iPad, I think.
Yeah, I did. I was so close to buying it last night because, yeah, exactly.
Nice. Tom, I think there was another game that came out very recently that is one of the 6, right?
Yeah, I've talked about it before, so I won't go into too much depth. This is Slipways, which is that is the trade empire building strategy game.
Mass
it wasn't Mass Effect Legendary Edition. And that's something that I played in Pico 8 form like years ago, and the Pico 8 version is still available. It's free. You can play that now. That's a super low res, lo-fi version of it, and now there's a glorious HD version. There's a lot more meat on its bones, and we had played it. I think maybe Graham might have talked about it as well. There was a demo a while back, and now it's fully out for all, and it's still great. And it now has a feature that I very much appreciate because I partly suggested it, which is that one of the problems I had with it before was that it's this game about setting up these loops of trade, because you'll have a planet that like it can make iron but it needs people, and then you have a planet that can make people but it needs microchips and wheat, and then you've got a place that can make microchips but it needs iron, and you've got to spot that, okay, well that first place made iron, so if I loop those in a loop that they almost satisfy each other, and then I've just got to figure out where I get wheat from, and then I join something else to there and I create another kind of thing. And you need to have an answer for all those questions before you build anything, because if you leave any of those needs unsatisfied, that planet is unhappy and you'll bleed happiness every year. And so that becomes kind of paralyzing at the start. You sit there just staring at this blank map, and you can mouse over each planet to see what your options are, but then once you stop mousing over, you no longer see them. And so you've got to hold it all in your head of like, that planet could be this planet could be that, and that planet could be this. And so the feature that Jakob has added in the final version is when you're looking at those options for what you could make that planet into, you can right-click on one to pin it, and then that just becomes like a little label on that planet. reminding you what that could be, what you've intended to make that, so that
a
people
little kind of memory reminder system.
Yeah, so that like people into Iron Planet, you bookmark that option, you pin it, and then you look around. Okay, where can I get iron from? I can get also where can I get people from? I can get people from this, but it would need chips and wheat. Okay, where can I get chips from? I'm going to bookmark this until you have all of them on screen. And also while you're doing it, it shows preview lines between those planets to sort of tell you, yes, you can connect these, or look out because these lines would cross and you can't do that. And then once that all is in place and looks like it'll work, then you terraform these planets and you build the trade routes and you spend the money and you progress through time. You burn up some of your months before the game ends. And yeah, I find that a much nicer way to get into it. It's much more approachable. You don't sort of have to commit to anything until you know it's going to work out.
Yeah, that does sound good. I've only played the Pico 8 version, and that was the thing that I found. I mean, I figured that was the game's challenge, but it probably isn't, is it? It's definitely the thing that I kind of grappled with.
Yeah, the game has like depth to spare, I think. Like once you're into it, it's all about, there's so many different ways you could configure these planets and link them up. Because you're not just deciding which planet to link to which, it's you decide what the planet is, which 2 resources should it take and produce, and each one has a set list of options, but sometimes it's like 5 different options for one planet. And so there's masses of depth and complexity hidden in there. And then also all the techs that you research let you break all those rules, all these things about like, lines can't cross. Well, there is a tech that lets you cross lines, but they're expensive. And, these 2 planets are out of range of each other. Well, there's a tech that increases the range. Okay, these 2... there's like a planet in the way. Well, you can get relays that then let you, make waypoints to kind of get your trade routes to go around all these awkward corners. And so there's so much to think about there that you don't really want the challenge to be just like a short-term memory test. Like, did you memorize all of those things? It's not like Snap.
Yeah.
I should play this. It sounds good. I've seen you mention it and thought I should play this, and I've just done that again. The whole process is completed itself.
And it's another thing you don't have to play on, talk about on the pod.
Exactly. Until I do. Alex, you want to throw a game in the pile?
My game is one of Tom's games. It's Tom's third game.
Oh,
I don't own these games. I've just played a little bit.
Well, this is welcome to Segway Town.
I want to talk about to
play, must defeat the Segway Master himself, Alex.
I'm going to talk about Unexplored, not Uncharted, Unexplored 2, which is a follow-up to a game that I really liked several years ago. It's a roguelike game, which is entirely generated. Everything that happens, all the dungeons you go into and the overworld and all the quests you go on, it's all generated. And it all came out of Unexplored 1. It very much follows from the system that was created for that. And that all stemmed from a kind of I think a PhD or a sort of definitely an academic project by a Dutch academic called Joris Dormans. And Unexplored 2 is much bigger and much more beautiful and much more polished and dizzyingly complicated in many ways, kind of action RPG kind of game. And I haven't really played an awful lot about it yet, so I haven't really got a sense of how all the quest systems will knit up together. But I was just to sort of explain kind of its kind of take on everything. So you are called the Wayfarer, and you start the game in a place, and it's sort of under siege from the Empire. I think they are some sort of mysterious kind of sort of antagonist, which is hunting for you, and suddenly appears in this area and fundamentally just chases you out of it, and you kind of immediately get hit the kind of like the world map, and you have to then travel to a place called Haven, which acts as your hub, from which you are taking the staff of Yendor to somewhere where you can, I think, destroy it. So it's like a quest ring quest kind of Tolkien thing, but with the Staff of Yendor, which to any rogue player or like roguelike player will recognize as the thing that you have to get from level whatever it is of NetHack and all those games that followed it. But in this game, you have it from the start, and it gives you access to magical powers. From then on, the world is... I was very surprised. So a lot of roguelikes have you following, either, the enemy is encroaching on you and you're kind of choosing a path going away from it. You're kind of reacting to situations and levels that the game is generating for you. This game, it's like an RPG. It's like the generated game is like a sort of like a Dungeons and Dragons, actually almost pen and paper RPG. Like your character has certain aptitudes, like you might be good at talking to people, you might be good at figuring out strange sort of deciphering sort of things you find in the levels, or you might be good at fighting, or you might be good at sneaking around. Lots of different aptitudes that you can go from, all of which you'll be familiar with. And you will discover leads on locations in the world that you can go to. Sometimes you'll just hear about them, and you can't yet go to them. Sometimes you hear of a quest that is based in these locations. There might be. So I found there's a quest to get a magic ring. Also in the same location, there was other quest that I could go for. When you go to that location, it could be a dungeon, or it might be an open air set of places, and you walk around it, and all of this stuff, all of the quests, all of the characters you spoke to, and all of the world map, and all of the locations that you visit, they're all entirely generated. And the thing with Unexplored 1 was that it had, which was a much simpler game. It was much more of a NetHack derived roguelike where you were just traveling down through a dungeon. But what that had was this amazing generated dungeon design, which I think you can see echoes of in a lot of the older roguelike games. But it creates these almost cyclical designs where you go into an area, you have a door that's locked in front of you, for instance, but the way to the right is open, so you go down that way, and you'll kind of go through a few areas, and then you'll find a levitate spell, and you go, okay, I've got a levitate spell, fine, and you battle on, and eventually you get to a dead end. The dead end is a chasm, and then you realise that levitate spell was actually almost a key, and the lock was the chasm, because now you can use that spell to float over it, and that path will then often loop back to the start area, and then that will then but provide you with the key that opens the door from that start area. And something that I interviewed Joyce Tormans ages ago about how he approached that, and he mentioned to me that kind of what he really loved in games is when you go into an area the first time round and it's all a bit unfamiliar, and you delve deeper into the dungeon, and then the dungeon then loops back on itself, and you come back into that first area. Now you know it, but also you have more tools. You might have a better sword. You might have might have that key to that locked door that you couldn't get through the first time. Either way, you come back to that first area with a like a new sensibility, like you have more confidence. You are able to grasp that area in a new way. It feels good. It feels great to be in that sort of finding yourself approaching somewhere familiar in a new way. And that's kind of all of these levels that were in Unexplored 1 were like that, constantly sort of mixing up these lock and key style puzzles with kind of these loops of familiarity and then unfamiliarity as you kind of go out into the dark. And and that's all present in what I've played so far of Unexplored 2, but with much more variety. So you're going up mountains, and the things that you come across are very different. And you're constantly kind of unlocking new abilities and and coming up against one of the game's new things, which is a really interesting take on puzzle and conversational design, I suppose you'd call it. So when you get into conversation with a lot of people, the game sort of slots it as a kind of a challenge, and and puts you into a little kind of mini game, which is the same game that you'll play if, for example, you're trying to scale a wall or unlock a door that you don't have a key for, or you are trying to decipher an inscription on a wall that you can't read. And this game has a bunch of tokens, like in a kind of a pile that shows you on the kind of on the screen, and it then deals you one of those tokens. And depending on the style of the challenge that you're taking on, you might have some advantages. Like, for instance, it might have put some tokens. I think it might put some tokens into that pile that are beneficial to you because you're looking for a green one, which is a success. And there are failure ones. And every round it will deal out a different token at random, and it might be successful, it might not be. But there's some in the middle ones, like tokens that, for instance, will put some more success tokens into the pile, but it will give you some sort of deficiency, like you might lose some health, or you might, gives yourself some sort of one of the trackers that sort of depends on how suspicious. I can't remember exactly what they are, but like, for instance, how suspicious people of you are in the area or something like that. And it's like this sort of, little kind of mini game where you're kind of playing off your skills against this chance game, but it's narrating that as you're going along. Go on, sorry.
So I read an article about that system before I played it. And in fact, it's the reason I played the game is because I was fascinated by this idea. So it's kind of their replacement for skill checks in D&D, like rather than rolling some dice, anything you would normally roll dice for, you play this game with. And the description of it in the Game of Sutra article that I read gave me a very different impression from what I got from playing it. And in particular, they said that they wanted it to be like a game unto itself where a player could be good at it or bad at it, beyond just whether their character, beyond whether their character has an aptitude for this test or whatever that adds elements to the game. They also wanted an element of player skill. And they were saying that, for all the token types they've made, even though there are successes and failures and all this other stuff, there is always a reason to not play a token. Even if it sounds like a really good one, there's some reason not to play it. And I didn't find that at all. I don't even really understand how that's possible, because you get dealt a token and you either have to play it or pay to redraw. And when you, unless you have some free redraws for some other character-based reason, but normally you have to pay to redraw. And the currency for that is this very rare, precious spark thing that sort of lets you, override something. And so really, you don't have a choice except to play it or cost yourself quite a significant resource. And for things that are just like, adds 3 successes to the pool, I can't see any eventuality where that's why you would ever not play that. And in fact, in almost all cases, it was either, if it was a failure token, I can't play it. If it's not a failure token, I will play it.
Yeah, I read that article as well, and I don't really see any of the complexity they talked about there. And I couldn't be good at this game. Certainly, I mean, I don't know whether it develops as the game as you go through a run, because it's, you just deal with whatever's in front of you, and if it's a red one, you probably want to do what you can to avoid it. And if it's a green one, I'll have some of that.
Yeah, the way I could see it working is, so I have been dealt like a great success, but I didn't see any difference in the effect it had. So this scenario that's come up most often is some guards stop you and they say, "Hey, we're looking for the Wayfarer. Is that you?" And you are the Wayfarer, but you can try and bluff. And I've had a success for that, and they say, "Oh, sorry, I guess it's the wrong person, move on." And I've also had a great success for that, and they say, "Oh, sorry, the wrong person, and move on." So it's not like a crit success where it has like, interesting extra effects. Or at least,
that one. I think in that test I've had a great success, and I think it reduced the counter. There's some sort of threat counter thing, I think, but it was very mechanical. Like, it's not like I felt like, wow, narratively, this is really exciting, and I'm really pleased with the result of that. It's like, oh, okay, good.
We should say this is in early access, only just launched in early access, so it's got a long way to go.
Yeah, and it feels like there's quite a lot of rough bits and pieces. Like I'm really grappling with something that I really don't know how it was gonna. So I went into this area where I knew there was a quest for a magic ring, and I sort of worked my way up a mountain, and at the top I came across a door with two plinths on either side, or like a plinth on either side. And around this level, there are a number of different statues, and you can put those statues on the plinths. And I just put a statue on one of the plinths, and the plinth then retracted into the floor. And I thought, okay, that looks good. Found another statue. Couldn't remember what the name of the statue I first put on there, because I realized that all the statues have got different names. Put that on to the second plinth. That also retracted, and the door remained closed. And I can't get them out. And then I realized that the real challenge there was to find two of I assume there was finding the two statues in the level and only putting those on. But I can't undo this. And I thought, okay, well, maybe if I come back to the area, do a little reset. Nope, it's everything, which I was pleased by, because, that means that it's remembering the world state, and that's good. At the same time,
it, the whole world persists as well between runs, doesn't it? When you die, that's what I heard. I didn't see any evidence of this in practice, but because I didn't get to test it actually, because I played on two different computers, and I don't think it has cloud save yet. But what I heard is that when you play as a new person, it's like 50 years later or something, and a new hero has come to try the same thing that old guy died doing.
That rings a bell, yeah.
And so I think the generated world stays the same, and then I hope it kind of ages and changes in some ways. But it would be really funny if your two statues were still locked in there just forever for all characters.
Previous guy fucked this one forever.
God, that would be a great
that ring. It's fucked.
That would be a great game concept. As you show up after an idiot hero has wrecked all of the puzzles and challenges and stuff, and that's your task, is to unfuck all these situations.
All of the locations I've found. So this is my second run, and I should say this it's permadeath, which means that and you die fairly easily, or at least you can get into fairly chaotic situations which see you dead fairly easy. Like the combat is very similar to Unexplored 1, which is to say it's not the most nuanced and fun combat. When you make a strike, you see it like a half circle or a quarter circle. If you're with a sword or something, or like a club or something, come out from your character, which is fully 3D and animated, but it isn't. This is not a kind of like a polished action game, and your weapons have cooldowns because it wants your sword to swipe faster, for instance, than a club. But it shows the club cooldown by just flashing it, and it's just frozen on the screen. The arm is frozen on the screen until the cooldown's over. It does not feel that good, and it very much rewards careful play, like taking a swipe, moving back out of range, coming in when you're ready. You've got a sword that you can hold up all the time as well. Shield that you can hold up all the time as well. I mean, there's lots of detail to it. So you've got daggers that you can throw. There's bows and arrows, and there are kind of various potions and things that kind of give you various kind of advantages and things. There's a lot there, but it's not. You don't feel. I think it doesn't ever want you to feel like a all murdering kind of hero. I think it wants you to feel things could turn on you, and you can be swamped by enemies and that kind of thing. It's but I liked that about Unexplored 1, and I'm pleased to see that fundamental is still here. But like lots of other aspects of it are much more polished. Like the character design and just the world is really pretty, like
looks
and
very
strange
nice.
And weird, and like lots of pastel colors, and the characters and the kind of like the races that you play as are just weird kind of weird fantasy stuff, which is
they look like
really
robots
nice
to me in a fun way. Like if if you made like a sort of buddy comedy about two mismatched robots, where one's really tall and gawky and the other's really round and, and fat. That's what the two species look like to me.
Yeah. I think I was going to say about the permadeath. So my second run, I'm not seeing any of the locations that I came across on my first run, but at the same time, I may just not have heard about those particular places yet. But I'm finding places that I hadn't been to before. I just don't know. Maybe I've discovered them somehow, because it seems very open the way that you and there are lots of places I can't visit yet because I haven't got enough information on how I'd go to them. Like traveling across the map is, you see your character kind of making the journey. You have an idea of the threats that are on the way. There are items that can mitigate various problems, like sort of wearing a certain, like, kind of walking boots or something like that will deal with certain threats and things. And occasionally you'll get dumped into a level because it's some sort of hazard, and there'll be enemies on it, or sometimes not enemies, and it'll be bonuses, and you can there'll be resources to find on them. You can camp to recoup health. There are loads of it's incredible. There's so much going on in this game, and that's like the thing I'm grappling with at the moment. Like, I just don't really understand what I'm doing or why or anything. There's so many things I could focus on, but you can easily get wounded, which will slow you down and make you strike slower. It takes 3 in-game days to heal from. You can get winded. You can get, I don't know. I got a cold. I got wet. All these different status of effects, which I like. I'm excited by the idea of that depth to the role playing, but the thing is, what I really want to ask you, Tom, is the mission design or the quest design. Like, I don't know, how have you got on with that? Because I thought there might be some ideas and things that you may have considered when you were making Heat Signature, that kind of dynamic kind of quest design thing in an open world design.
It's hard to judge at the moment because I haven't got very far in it. And because it is early access and because it's a massively complicated game, I'm hitting a lot of brick walls that it's hard to tell whether I'm misplaying or whether the sort of systems aren't quite there yet. Like, I got given a quest, sounds a bit like your one with the ring on the mountain. It might not have been a ring, but some kind of legendary item is in this mountain range. And I think I paid for that tip in a village. And then I also got another quest that was also in the same mountain range. And I was really excited to go to this mountain range. So I traveled to the next node in that direction. And then I traveled to the next node in that direction, and my boots wore out or whatever. And I repaired my boots and traveled to the next node in that direction. And then I just couldn't go any further in that direction. And so I kind of, okay, well, maybe it's too steep or something. So I went south and then kept doing that. And I just couldn't find any way into this mountain range ever. I died trying to ever get in there. And it wasn't clear to me, like, okay, if mountains are impassable, if some kinds of mountains are impassable or whatever, that's fine. But I kind of need to be able to see that on the map before I invest masses in going in that direction, just to find, with no explanation, that I can't progress.
I assume that was a knowledge thing, that there's someone that will tell you about the route. I got the feeling that that's the way that stuff worked. I'm not sure about that though.
Yeah, again, there's just to know that there is some kind of barrier there is information that would be nice to have, because I can move through mountains in other situations. And I had the knowledge of where these places are themselves. And so, I don't think I've ever seen a quest through, at least nothing that was, beyond the trivial stuff. And the stuff I've been given all sounds, it does sound generated. It's not sort of going to fool you to think that it's a fully handwritten RPG. So it remains to be seen how well that stuff kind of clicks together once you've been through the motions a few times and had that feedback into, actually use that magical ring to then do another quest, and whether that stuff makes it pay off. So far, it hasn't really paid off for me. And to be honest, because it's quite janky or I don't understand it, one of the two, I have died, I guess only twice, but both times it is presented like a full RPG. Like, you go through, even if you skip the tutorial, you start, as you say, in that kind of sanctuary area that then has a kind of scripted event that you have to flee this entity and run out of it as it falls apart. And then there's the journey to the main town. There's all this stuff at the start that's kind of just, you're going to do it the same every time, basically. which makes sense at the start of like Skyrim, the cart ride to the gallows and stuff. At the start of a 150-hour RPG, it makes sense to have some story-based introduction that you just have to go through. But in this, which is death, at least for me, has been very roguelike-esque in that it comes out of nowhere, and my whole run is completely over with no opportunity for me to kind of react or see how I could have avoided it. And then when that's also, the end of multiple hours of not just that it's been multiple hours of play, but that I'm really early on in my journey as a character. Like I say, I didn't really complete any quests. I was really just getting started. I put all this time and investment in it. And then I was in some area with some like gas vent things, and they were on weird, each one was on a different kind of timer. And some of the timers, I just couldn't see any way to find a safe space to get through them. And they were blocking my way to progress. So I had to get through them. And there were just no plants anywhere, no like healing stuff that I could access anywhere. And so I just ran out of health doing that. And that was the end of my run. And that was a real downer.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think that it doesn't want you to see that start sequence very much. Because the quest list it's very long. Like and that's just the critical quest stuff to get to do the main line stuff. And and there's so much of it, and that gets wiped completely on death. I don't know exactly what persists between. I know that in the Haven area, there are 2 buildings, and one of them has a vault that you can store certain really valuable items so that you can kind of pick them up on another run.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think that you're meant to be surviving for a long time. And yeah, I mean, the only thing that has kept me alive is stopping going fast through areas and just doing there's a full stealth system in it as well. So doing a lot of stealth, looking for traps and things, because I keep getting boned by kind of explosive traps.
That was one I didn't, I invested in stealth, obviously, and I was pretty good at it. And so I could sneak past a lot of these encounters. And after I did, I was always thinking, was that actually a good thing to do? Like, do you want to avoid combat? Because, like, presumably you get experience and items.
There's an XP system. I don't think there's an XP system.
Really?
No. So I think you're good.
So, but I guess, I mean, you're going to get something for defeating enemies, right?
I think that they're just, I mean, I don't know. It certainly wasn't particularly important in Unexplored 1.
So maybe it is good to sneak past everything. I was doing that as much as I could, but it felt weird just to sort of dodge content, basically, because it's, it's not a stealth game. It's avoiding people is really just, is quite rote. And so just doing that to every encounter was weird. And then I just hit this is my other life where I died. I fought a couple of nasty enemies and then moved on a bit. And then there was just like 16 of them and a thing that spawns them, and just got completely swamped. I wasn't even, within 1% of being able to survive that encounter. And I don't know why. I was like, I hadn't knowingly taken on any risky quest or anything. I was just trying to travel somewhere, and that happened. So again, it's like when death can be that sudden and that sort of inescapable, it's hard to get invested again.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that makes me a little nervous about this game, where it comes from a pedigree of fairly short session, single session games, roguelikes, the classic roguelikes, where this run will they often take a long time if you're good at them, an hour or something. But this wants you to put you on a full world spanning, quest line with vast amounts of character development and permadeath. And, and it's the sort of game where, when you've got an hour long session, and if you don't know the system, if you start playing Brogue or something and you don't know the system, you're going to die very, very soon, but you're not going to mind because it only took you 5-10 minutes. But in this one, that would be very frustrating. And especially if you get as far as kind of an hour in or 2 hours in, 3 hours in, feel you're at the start of a journey and then plop, you're out. Especially when it's down to level design.
Yeah, it's a tough line to tread.
I felt just the last thing I wanted to say was some of the way that the dungeons are designed or like generated, there's a lot more obfuscation of lock and key, and the the way that you succeed at some of the generated puzzles, are less clear. And I've wandered around quite a lot, just not understanding how to succeed until I realized that, oh, okay, I didn't realize, the way that you interact with certain things, like the magic system. Usually there's like a magical tree in an area, and as long as you stand within a certain radius of that tree, you can use the spell that it gives. So it might sort of send roots out of the ground, kind of destroying things in the way, or it might shoot out a kind of magical light that when it pops out of existence, you will blink into that location. Sort of that, which allows you to get across kind of chasms and things like that. I've found those slightly odd and difficult to pass. I suppose, that's the learning thing more than anything else. But because Unexplored 1 was based on a template, which is much more familiar, I found it a lot more readable and a lot more accessible as a result.
The thing I wanted to say actually about the skill check system, I was kind of, explaining why it didn't live up to what I thought it was going to be based on this article. But I should say, actually, it's I quite like it as a system. It's better than rolling dice. And in particular, one of the problems they're trying to solve is that rolling dice in a video game doesn't feel like you're doing the thing. And when you fail, it doesn't feel like your fault. And it doesn't... Players are much less accepting of their fate in that scenario than they are in real D&D, where you physically roll the dice. And people obviously, have outsized reactions to their failure or success, but it's a fun social thing. And it's actually probably the social context is half the battle there. And so I think it's a really good problem to solve. And that's kind of half the battle with game design, is knowing what problem you're trying to solve. And I think they're definitely going down the right path with that. Like, that is the problem you need to fix. Or if you have a great solution to that, then a whole lot about making a generated RPG becomes way more viable and way more fun. And I don't know if this system is whether it just needs some tweaks for me to get what it is that they were going for with it. But right now it kind of feels like I would want just like a more in-depth version. They talk in that article about we wanted something that was more involved than dice rolls, but less involved than deck builder. And my brain immediately went to, but what if you did make a deck builder? Maybe everything should be a deck builder. Did he consider that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I've welcomed the checks whenever they've come, because I'm doing something, and also it contextualizes what you're doing kind of as you go along, sort of, and it is generic lines generally that you're seeing kind of spooling out as you kind of make each option pulls out. But seeing that, it just grounds it a bit more as well. That it makes you feel a bit more involved.
Yeah. What have you been playing, Chris?
I have been playing a very different game to this in every conceivable way, I think. So this will be a bit of an abrupt change in tone. But I've played the first couple of levels of, and a few hours of, Necromunda Hired Gun.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm going to turn, apparently, my weekly-ish appearance on this podcast into what all-right Warhammer game have you played lately, apparently. And Hired Gun is interesting because it's, well, I'll say up front, it's not amazing. I think it's deeply in that kind of, 5-6 out of 10 Warhammer territory at the moment. I have the sense that it may have been released a little bit before it was fully cooked. But it's also completely not the game I thought it was going to be either. So this is a first-person shooter set in the Necromunda setting, which is sort of beloved Games Workshop property that goes back to, the deepest 90s in its sensibility, and that's going to be important. So hold on to that. Gang war in the Underhive in one of the kind of the Imperium's kind of industrial sort of mega city planet. And it's a very vivid setting, and not one that's had an enormous amount of attention in games, despite being perfect for it. And this is easily the most, and I'll say this up front, it's easily the most striking rendition of that setting I have seen, probably outside of the tabletop game itself. And it's also probably actually one of the most visually striking 40K games I've ever seen, generally speaking. Like it's, it's fairly high fidelity in its own way, but also the environment's absolutely massive and quite inventive. Like they draw from, 40 classic kind of 40K environment design in a lot of ways, but then there's a lot of kind of original thought applied to it. And you fight in the game across truly fucking huge, like serious Sam scale chunks of kind of cavernous underhive, like through massive industrial complexes or across like a 50-foot tall trench network that is itself made out of compressed cubes of like manufacturing off waste, which makes it look like a block level, even though it's not, which is both ugly and kind of clever at the same time. You fight on a massive train, like I'm gonna say a big train, like the biggest train you've ever seen. And you maybe think you can imagine an extremely big train. It's an extremely fucking big train. The front of the train, the engine bit, is like, it's as big as the final boss battle arena from the end of the second Machine Games Wolfenstein game. I only think that because that is a big level, and the front of the train is that size. Like, it's genuinely massive. But what's really interesting about it is the kind of the overall theme is you are a bounty hunter, like an independent operator, not attached to any of the gangs. And you're a hired gun, if you will, and you're carving out a life for yourself in the Underhive and getting involved in various scrapes. And, there is a hub level that you return to between missions, where you delve into some pretty involved, and I'll get into whether that's a good thing or not, like RPG systems to do with upgrading your own sort of bionics, upgrading your weapons in granular detail, and other kind of ways to progress. And then you go back out, you pick a mission, and you go back out and you do it again. The thing that surprised me about it, all of that I was aware of, and there are ways in which you can feel the kind of the influence of something like Cyberpunk in its plot, actually, initially in some ways, but also just in that Necromunda is in some ways GW Cyberpunk setting in a bunch of ways, and so there's always going to be some thematic overlaps. And I think initially, from the initial trailers, maybe not the more in-depth gameplay trailers, but from the initial look, mistook it for a first-person shooter RPG, basically, like Cyberpunk, like any other game that you kind of expect to fit this formula. Maybe like a Borderlands. And it has some of those elements, but its fundamental influence really is New Doom, which I wasn't really expecting. Mm-hmm. And going back a little bit further from there, Bulletstorm, which is a game that I think we all collectively stopped talking about in about 2013, but everyone talked about it for a bit. And like I say, Serious Sam, these very, very highly mobile 90s style shooters. And it is in some ways, through a combination of its successes and its failures, it manages to feel more profoundly 90s than Doom and Doom Eternal did, because it's also a Warhammer thing. And because it's set in these kind of like almost too large, ugly, striking environments. And so you are extremely, extremely quick, and most enemies die almost instantly. And you can run, double jump, air dash, grapple, wall run, and slide while shooting. You can chain all of these things together. You get a lot of these abilities piled on you quite quickly, and you just do the thing that makes it not overwhelming is the fact that it's also quite easy, at least on the normal difficulty that I'm playing on. So you're kind of blasting through hordes and hordes and hordes and hordes of gangs, kind of really tearing through the environment, sort of, performing Doom-style melee takedowns, which are quite brutal in some cases, to get like health pickups that kind of spring out of the bodies of the people you're slaying. Kind of, you end up with so much ammo that that's never an issue, and you're just kind of like tearing around the levels, doing all of this stuff. And it's a really weird mix of things. So one thing I should put at the top is it's very janky. The Doom comparison, I think, is obviously what they're aiming for, but it doesn't have anywhere near Doom's level of polish or kind of finesse. And that means a ton of things. It means that, just on a kind of bugs and level, it means that animations are kind of stiff and a bit awkward. Often those takedown animations misalign with the enemy you're actually killing. So you'll be stabbing the air furiously in a particular direction as a man a few feet away, like, has his arms fall off, which I believe is heresy. There's all this stuff that doesn't quite hold together. And also, I think what it made me appreciate is how much work the Doom team did to make a game that fast legible.
Yeah.
A game this fast is actually quite a bad mix for a game that is also set in quite dark, atmospheric environments with enemies that are themselves like human-sized and relatively ordinary-looking people, because you do lose them. You lose them against the environment. You lose them, you kind of rely on their barks to kind of tell you where they are. And I'll talk about barks in two different contexts. One is, it's kind of cool to me that half the people from Necromunda are from Yorkshire. I never really thought about that. That's the accent they've gone with. That's the Necromunda accent. Go for it. If you play as, you have a choice of your character at the beginning of the game from it's not like full character customization, but you pick a portrait and that affects who you are. And I wasn't expecting the lady who plays the female version of the lead just goes full angry, Stark, basically. Full on giving it your all when you are a kind of angry northern lord in an episode of Game of Thrones. It's very good. In that regard, it's good Warhammer acting, which I keep coming back to. I mean, it's ropey, and a lot of the performances are on the edge of but that at least is kind of part of this territory and has its own charm. The other reason barks are important is if you can't find enemies, you can press C to withdraw a kind of cyber rat themed squeaky toy, which summons your mastiff, a big dog that puffs into existence in a puff of dog smoke and immediately highlights all the enemies in the environment that you're in. And then you can press C again for the dog to go kill people, I think. And it does, kind of. It just goes and kind of does stuff. And occasionally you'll see it leap back into the air and vanish, and it's very funny when that happens.
Is it a magical dog? Is it like a
ball
dog, or is it meant to just live in the shadows?
Okay. I'll get there. I think it's supposed to be in the shadows. And the game is divided into these pretty big levels, which are where you get these kind of impressive environments from, which take me 20-30 minutes to complete and have a story that runs through them. Loosely speaking, it is ropey. And bonus missions, which you can go on at almost any time between levels. Once you've beaten a level once, you can kind of go back to chunks of its environment, because they tend to be carved up into arenas, to do a short level to get money to reinvest in your gear and your stuff back at the main level. And there's something in that loop, I think, that can and should work with a game with kind of arcade fundamentals, play a long level, play a short level, get points, upgrade yourself. That seems like a solid loop. It's also very funny to me that as you're doing the side missions, you're doing missions for the various factions of Necromunda, the various gangs and things. And that makes sense. They're the ones posting the jobs on the board. But they've cast that net a little bit too wide. And maybe that this will only be funny to people who give a shit about Warhammer. But you expect to see the various, Necromunda gangs listed as potential clients, the Eschers or the Goliaths or the Orlocks or whatever. But also listed are the Helot Chaos Cult and the Gene Stealer cultists. And it's why are they posting jobs on the jobs board? Could you overthrow the Spire, please, so that the Great Devourer will come and eat us? We'll pay you 2,000 credits, which you can use to buy a red dot site. You're okay. All right. Oh, great. Thanks. I didn't think you would say yes. We're literally Tyranids.
It kind of takes they are in, obviously they are in Necromunda, but it takes the sort of the rosters kind of rather literally. It doesn't make any sense.
But it is, I say, it's a very kind of evocative presentation of that setting. But I think, I think it is a little too janky to recommend. And also I think it is a strange match of game to maybe like what people want from that setting. The way I would describe it is, it feels like you are playing Necromunda, but you are a dickhead who has convinced their friend to let them play as their like completely overpowered Imperial assassin, and is just tearing through everybody like with no stakes, which is a strange match for the setting, because Necromunda, the tabletop game, is very much about, these skirmish games where consequences for success and failure are very granular, where a bullet can send someone spiraling off a gantry-way and falling down the floor, and then anything some scrape. They're kind of sandbox games in that regard, all about the kind of painful consequences of failure for your little gang trying to eke out a living in a very lethal environment. So
as a gang, you're kind of normal people as well, and you're not firing
relatively.
You're firing auto rifles and things, like in general, you're firing auto rifles rather than like the sorts of things that Space Marines fire and whatever.
Right. Like, I mean, it's some and like modern Necromunda, the tabletop game has definitely moved the power level up a little bit, but there's still a sense that I would say power level is not really the important thing. The important thing is the sense of danger that comes with being in that environment, regardless of how good your weapons are. And this really doesn't have that. And I think the most telling thing is, like, I think, Necromunda, the tabletop game, cares very much if you fall off something. This is a game without fall damage. You just fling yourself into the air with like a grapple hook that will take you, 30 meters in the air at a zip, and then you'll double jump, and then you'll dash, and you're literally flying at this point. And you'll use some augmetic you've got to slow down time, pull out a sniper rifle, and snipe a leaping Ogrin that's jumping through the air to try and intercept you. And you're basically a superhero. And it's kind of fun. Like that, I would say there aren't enough FPSs that just go for it and let you kind of have fun and be creative and move and be free to kind of take on combat to your own way. But, and that's the reason that I don't dislike the game. But the other side of it, though, is like, this is almost in some ways a weird situation to put that kind of gameplay in, because I think there'll be a lot of people who are attracted to the idea of a Necromunda game because they love the setting, and it's not necessarily the best way to see it at 80 miles an hour, even though the environments are great. And I think it does look good, and it feels good as well. Like, I think some of the shooting is fun.
I find it really interesting that it's by Strumon Studio, who made Divine Cybermancy, which was incredibly ambitious and very janky. As far I never played it. Did you play it?
I did, yeah. I think that, and you can see that legacy because it is janky. And it's interesting where we will and won't forgive jank. I think jank in service of like a immersive RPG experience is often forgiven because people really want that sense of connection to the world. And Hired Gun isn't actually interested in giving you that sense of connection to the world because he wants you to skate through the world at 100 miles an hour while, eviscerating hordes of dudes. And so in that context, the jank doesn't feel as forgivable because it's not in pursuit of something that I want specifically from this world. And at the same time, I think it's also lend them to, there's a deep well of customization here. And building and customizing your own gun sounds and looks pretty cool. Like, you can really customize all the different bits. You can add and remove parts. You can change the way it looks and name your gun, which is probably the most Necromunda feeling thing in it in some ways. But the question is, should you do that? Should you care? Like, the actual roster of weapons is not that high, but you'll find multiple versions of the same guns with slightly different stats and rarities, which encourages you to compare. But we're talking about differences of percentages on things like crit chance, and like, this gun has a 3% chance to cause an enemy to drop 50p when they die and stuff like that. And it's like, it feels like there's sort of mechanics there, but I'm not sure what purpose they actually serve. So in the early part of the game, I have found myself investing purely in making those systems go away faster. Which is, I always find it fascinating when developers give you this option. One of the things you can invest in is your own cybernetics, and they're very granular and divided among the various parts of your body, including your brain or your head. And one of the things you can invest in your head is your voice. And if you upgrade your voice, every time you upgrade your voice, you gain 30% more money for doing secondary missions. which means that every time I reinvest all my money in becoming more mellifluous so that I can convince Tyranids to give me more money, basically. And this scales up to, I think, about like 150% over what you'd normally get. At which point, because money is really its only real main way of gating your power level, or like level gives you access to stuff and the money lets you buy it. I've just put all my points into getting more points, and it turns out that's a good use of your points. So stuff like that it doesn't have a point, and that's pointless and therefore a shame. And so all of it, like, it doesn't quite hold together in that regard. And like I say, it's sort of its ambitions to be something more immersive fall flat, even as I do enjoy being in spaces. And so it's the kind of thing that I would find myself like maybe recommending someone play if they loved the setting and they had an opportunity to probably not. I hate recommending people not pay for price things because it's very hard to track value, but it doesn't feel like the kind of experience that you'd be super glad you paid £30 for, because it did. But it feels like the kind of thing that, particularly with patches and time, could grow into something quite fun. I found myself testing it in the way that for the kind of cult jank, not Gene Stealer cult jank, just cult jank that ultimately makes games beloved. Like things in that kind of Earth Defense Force kind of realm. Like, is it that, or is it just a bit ropey? And I think it's probably just a bit ropey. But I could see a future for it where I think with a bit of polish and greater clarity, it kind of finds an identity for itself. I did want to finally mention one other thing about it, though, which I think is a really weird decision they've made, and probably the most arresting, off-putting decision I've maybe unintentionally faced in a game for a while. So, beginning of the game, you already have tons of cybernetics. And then there's a mishap at the start, a deadly mishap that leads you getting more cybernetics that kind of bring you into the story proper. That's all fine, and that means that you go to the rogue doc who kind of fits out your cybernetics and stuff. And luckily, in that initial mishap, your trusty dog also survives. Your mastiff also survives and is there, and you can pet them in the hub area and so on. You also have the option to buy cybernetics for your dog. Its head, its arms, legs. Hang on a minute. I know what a dog is. Shut up, Alex. Like, you can upgrade your dog in a lot of ways. I don't know why you would do this, because your dog is on a cooldown, and like, why am I going to invest in slightly more armor for a dog I only see every 3 minutes? Maybe that's me being churlish, I don't know. But the point is, this is what weirds me out about it. And I appreciate we're in the grim darkness of the far future here. But your dog is fine, as far as I can tell, largely indestructible, and fully 100% organic dog at the beginning of the game. You have to pay money to willingly replace parts of your dog with robot parts of your dog to create a cybermastiff, which is a thing in Necromunda, which is obviously becoming. And so I just haven't. I mean, even notwithstanding the choice to invest money in making more money, I don't know. I can't quite bring myself to tell the doctor, yeah, please give my dog wheels or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it feels weird to me. Like, I think I would be so much more comfortable with it if they established at the beginning of the game, you have a cyber dog. That choice is out of your hands. This is how you would upgrade your cyber dog. But taking that kind of decision on putting the decision in my hands to make that choice on my dog's behalf, I think that's of greater ethical complexity that I'm willing to take on.
That's too dark,
game.
Even for the grim future.
Yeah, exactly.
of all the things to moan about in that world.
Do you remember how Prey did this whole thing of like, you can take on this alien technology, but at some point the game is going to start like judging you for it, and the security systems are going to turn on you if there's too much alien in your body. Maybe one day your dog will have to go through a metal detector, and because you've never put any cybernetics in him, he'll be fine.
Right.
You get the secret good ending.
Or like a bad ending, because I didn't turn him into a rad cyber dog when I had the opportunity to. I just don't know. But
well, out of interest, what is the dog's role? Like, is it some sort of smart bomb style thing?
Yeah.
What do you need it for?
You don't. This is the thing. So it's useful because it's hard to find enemies in the big levels, And there's another thing that so it's useful. It's actually kind of useful. It's so janky. It doesn't feel quite intended, but like you get these enemies, like boss enemies, and the whole level will end when you kill them because maybe it's a secondary mission and that's your goal, right? You go kill the Escher boss or whatever. And you can tell that these particular, like, boss enemies have shields, and if it's a blue shield, then it's like a regular enemy, and if it's a gold shield, then it will take fucking ages. And one of the reasons it's a little janky is like most enemies die so quickly, and then you hit the bullet sponges that have the shields or the armor or whatever. And there's like this set sweet spot when an enemy doesn't have a shield, you can use a melee takedown if you can get to them quickly, and you can get everywhere quickly because you're fucking super Batman. And so I think the dog can only do takedowns on people if they don't have shields either. And so I was fighting a woman with a golden shield and a big train in this computer game. And I was shooting at her and waiting and shooting and waiting and running away and regenning and finding more health and shooting her and waiting. And then I sort of did an exploratory summon of the dog. And it didn't do anything. And I was shooting and waiting, and she just started running away. And sometimes certain enemies will just fucking run. And the levels are massive. And she's running up this like spiral staircase. I just grapple up the other way, and I'm sort of peppering her with shots. And at some point, one of my peppered shots probably clicked off the last pip of shield that she had. And I just heard this bark of someone saying like, "You won't end me, bounty hunter," and then just the dog killed her because she'd entered into like dog takedown territory. And that felt like I don't know if it's intended to work that way, that you can like prime the takedown with the dog and then whittle the rest of the shield off and the dog will go do it. That felt cool. That made me feel like a bounty hunter, I suppose. But then it was also weird because I was getting shot and then I stopped taking damage and the entire level very slowly faded to black because I hadn't realized she was the person I'd had to kill to end the level. It's that kind of game. It's 5, but like, yeah. Tom, I feel like we're 3 games down, 4 games down.
Yes,
3.
I got real quick thoughts on some
Cool.
So, like Mass Effect Legendary Edition, I have started it, and I'm playing obviously Mass Effect 1, and I'm doing the eat your vegetables thing of actually making different choices to try and more fully explore the game, and it's a mistake. Don't do it.
Wow. Yeah,
cave to your guilty impulses. Do the same thing. Make the good choices again, because it turns out there's a reason you're making those choices, and it's because they're the right ones. So I'm playing as a male shepherd, and I know a lot of people who play male shepherd first and liked it. I think you have to play it first if you're going to play it, because if you've already played a female shepherd, then there are just so many lines where the performance is like fine, but you flash back to Jennifer Hale's performance thinking, God, she really sold that line. She really made this moment like magical in a way that it's really not right now. And I'm a Vanguard, which that's the class I picked in later Mass Effects, but in Mass Effect 1, I was an infiltrator the first time. And that lets you use a sniper rifle, which if it kills something in one hit, that kind of feels pretty good in any game. And Vanguard just doesn't have that kind of punch. I can use pistols and shotguns, so I don't really have any good long range options. And the combat in Mass Effect 1, I gather they've made some improvements to it, but it's still really unsatisfying. And in fact, I would say it's less satisfying now playing as a bad class in the revised version than it was playing as a good class in the original version. Because I remember having an all right time with it first time through, but it's really dragging now, and I've just had to turn it down to casual because I just want the combat to go away. And I went for that class because it had like throw, the biotic power, which I was picturing force throw in the Jedi Knight games, which is really fun. And it's not really like that. And it's the targeting system for biotic abilities in Mass Effect 1 is really ropey, and they just kind of, you can aim them on the bit of someone who's poking out of cover, and then the targeting system will just kind of have it hit the cover instead. So that's kind of deeply unsatisfying. So that's just a PSA. Play Mass Effect 1 exactly as you did the first time, if you liked it.
It's funny. That means male shepherd infiltrator for me. So I'm one
right.
in terms of mistakes versus not, apparently.
Yeah, I think Mass Effect 2. I think maybe this will start paying off then. because part of the reason I'm a male shepherd is I also wanted to be able to try some of the romance options that weren't available to me as a female shepherd. And the combat in Mass Effect 2, I remember being a lot better. And so from then on, like being more experimental classes will pay off.
They figure out Vanguards as well because you get the dash.
Yeah. I actually did play Vanguard in Mass Effect 2 the first time, so I'll have to change that decision as well now. Maybe I'll be Infiltrator and maybe they suck in Mass Effect 2.
That's fine. How about a soldier? Just have a gun.
Oh, God.
Gun.
Can't even imagine choosing a
gun possessor.
Yeah, that's my superpower, is I own many guns. And then what else? Oh, yeah, Subnautica Below Zero. I'm pretty early on in it, but it just reminded me how fucking good Subnautica is. Like that... especially going back to the start, that feeling of being in this massive hostile world and just trying to eke out your little corner of safety, splashing around in the shallows and gathering enough resources just to get a bigger O2 tank and just to get the Sea Glide, that little propeller thing that's, not a vehicle, and how big a deal even that was back then. I'd forgotten all of that stuff, and it was really fun to go through that arc again. I've now got a sea truck, which is the equivalent to the sea moth. I don't really know what's different about it. I think it might be more expandable. I think you can like bolt stuff onto it maybe. But I haven't got far enough to do that. And that's just a really good game. This new one is basically the same. It's colder. There hasn't been a lot of... it's felt very similar in terms of, the vibe and what your concerns are moment to moment and the satisfaction of resource gathering and trying to make a little home for yourself.
Yeah, I know Pip enjoyed the time she spent with it. I think she's finished it now. Yeah,
it just came out of early access like in the last couple of weeks, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she waited until it was primed and ready. But yeah, and then I think devoured it very quickly. But I like the penguin.
Yeah, those are kind of freaky once you get up close. They look really cute and you rush over to them and you're like, wow, there's just a lot of eyes here.
But you should play. One should play all of the first one first, shouldn't? I've seen that advice.
Oh, should you? Because I didn't.
Okay.
I got pretty deep into Subnautica 1, but I felt like the kind of some plot threads were coming to a head, but I had to go really, really deep with the Cyclops with the maximum depth upgrade module, and it was a very scary place, and I just kind of lost my guts for it. I didn't make a decision to stop playing. I just, after the last time I stopped playing, I was fully intending to return, and then I just never. The prospect of returning became this quite daunting thing to go back into that, the scary place.
Yeah. But maybe it's just a sort of knowing what where that game went is probably enough.
Yeah. I think that definitely there's some things in this that would have been a big surprise if I hadn't got as far as I did in Subnautica 1. And for that reason, it hasn't had quite the same wow factor that the first one did, kind of inevitably. Like, there's so much in Subnautica 1 that I just had no idea was in the game at all.
Yeah.
And the last one is Griftlands, which is also another recent early access graduate. Been in early access for, God, it must be 2 years. I've been playing it for so long. Maybe... Actually, I think I might have got pre-release access at some point, so maybe it just seems longer. But it's been on Steam for quite a while in early access because it was originally an Epic exclusive. And that's been interesting because now I can see what people think of it. And the verdict is in and everyone loves it. It's got like 96% positive reviews after thousands. So it's been a huge hit and a success. That is slightly surprising to me because to me, I do like it. I like it a lot, but the more I play it, the more the tension between a deck builder and a story-based RPG really chafes. They seem to fight each other at every turn. And like when I'm replaying, because I've played there's 3 different characters, each has a unique story, and I've played all of them once now. I haven't finished them all, but I've played the bulk of them. And replaying them, I don't. I'm getting impatient with the text. I want to skip it all because I've seen most of it before. And little things are different and you can take different decisions and stuff, but most of it's the same. And there's just a lot of it. And, unlike FTL, unlike Monster Train, unlike roguelikes in general, that have story events, these ones are wordy. They are conversations where you have got to skip and skip and skip and then get to the decision and make a choice. And the choices matter enough that you can't just skip the whole thing and disengage. You've got to pay enough attention to know what you're doing. But at the same time, it's mostly retreads. And when I'm engaging with a deck builder, I am always just itching for that next choice, that next upgrade, that next way of customizing my deck, of working towards this thing I'm trying to craft into a well-oiled machine. And so I'm really impatient for the stuff in between. And so that really kind of clashes for me. And then also, like Unexplored 2, it's very long, playthroughs. It's an RPG journey in which you're building a character and deciding who you are in this world. And I can get invested in that, but that clashes badly with a deck builder where especially this deck builder, where you can have very sudden deaths. I was having a great time with the sort of war hero character, and I built a build that was working well for me, and I'd sort of decided who he was. Like each time you can kind of, as your negotiation deck evolves and your combat deck evolves, you can kind of decide am I a ruthless person who intimidates everybody in negotiation because I have all this reputation for killing people in combat? Or in this case, I decided I'd just be everyone's friend. This guy has a good rep, and I built a negotiating deck around just being like the smooth talking, nice guy who would always spare people and try and make friends instead of enemies. But packed a punch if he actually had to fight somebody, and got really invested in that. Got like two days into it, which is, the campaigns are 3 days long each, and then they just sent 30 to 50 feral AutoDogs at me, and I was killed. It wasn't 30 to 50, it was 9, which doesn't sound like a lot when I say it out loud, but if you see it on screen, it just looks absurd. It looks like the UI broke. There's so many fucking AutoDogs. And it was just like a random thing. I just decided to help a guy in need, and 9 AutoDogs showed up, and I can't fight 9 things. Only 4 of them can attack at once. And again, that number sounds small, but 4 things attacking at once is insane. And it's also just really random. If they all decide to attack me, for example, there's no amount of block I can ever have that's going to save me. And that's what happened. So I lost. And the whole thing, all that investment just comes crashing down. You're just like, it's just over.
What, may I ask, is an AutoDog?
It's a robot dog.
Oh, I see.
How they go feral is the bigger question.
Badly maintained cyber gear. I've been talking about this.
Yeah.
I trust these people.
It's what Chris.
I'll send you the screenshot in some capacity.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just surprised that robot dogs have come up twice in such quick succession. That's my main takeaway from this.
The screen on which it shows this says the words feral AutoDog so many times, because every feral AutoDog is called feral AutoDog, and I think its class is also feral AutoDog. And so it says those words twice on every single unit portrait, and there's 9 of them. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, just for good measure, it just says feral AutoDog twice more.
Feral by AutoDog for feral AutoDog by feral AutoDog.
Yes,
exactly. It's also one of those phrases that becomes increasingly meaningless the more it is said.
Yeah.
And a very feral AutoDog to you. Is that it? Is that the 6? Is that 6?
Yeah.
Incredible.
Got through it.
It's a bumper.
Incredible.
Bumper.
What a crop.
Shall we have some questions?
Yeah, go on then. Let's do exactly 3, or as it's called in science, of Tom Francis quarter dozen.
Sure, yes.
I said 3, I meant 2 as well.
Cool. So... the Francis 6th of a dozen.
Do you mean a Francis half dozenth of a dozen?
Sure, let's say that.
Number jokes. So it's a spicy one. First question comes from Matthias, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who writes in response to a conversation I had with Graham on the previous episode of the podcast. He writes, Hi, mostly wanted to say I appreciated last week's Chris Graham pod. Helped me put some things in perspective that I hadn't even thought about regarding how we get into certain hobbies without necessarily guiding ourselves towards them, especially as children. As an adult, It's far more plausible to suddenly decide to get into telescopes and find yourself cohabiting with a big tube you wheel outside twice a year. As a child, you often take what you can get. I'd add to that a philosophical idea that I learned of only lately, that there are 3 innate psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness, of which at least the first 2 are often strongly, if implicitly, discouraged at school. Along with the fact that the barrier of entry to many video games and similar slightly geeky hobbies is low, this does explain the strong draw towards video game worlds where we can express both autonomy and probably also competence, at least compared to our parents, though my dad is still better than me at Civ. It does, however, also partly explain why many people seem to be drawn away from games as adults. Yes, there's the added fact of free time crumbling to vague memory, but I feel games for some reason don't have the staying value of, say, books, where you feel like, shit, I'm a bad person for having not read a good book for a while. Still, but maybe that is just a cultural trope. Yet, silly question. What's the first video game you remember liking or getting into that turned out to not be good at all when you later replayed it? Thanks again. Regards, Matthias.
I don't know whether I could say that it's not good at all, but I did find I definitely invested myself in some of the kind of those PlayStation art classics like Ico and Shadow of the Colossus.
Ooh,
when they came out.
Alex.
It is spicy. This is spicy.
Shit. You saved the spiciest for last, didn't you?
He's coming for the king. He best not miss.
I think my desire for them to be great helped me love them when they came out. And going back to the kind of the remakes, I don't know, didn't have the magic for me again, because I think also the sense of space that they had were novel when they came out, like the sort of a game that is quiet with birdsong with beautiful light in it, like that was kind of novel on a PlayStation 1, and then an open world was novel on a PlayStation 2, and a kind of realistic horse, and so
you should have
playing
written
them
the back of the box. The back of the bollocks. What are the back of the bollocks bullet points? What are the back of the box bullet points? That is hard to say without saying the word bollocks, I believe. The back of the book bollock points.
Back of the bollocks. Yeah.
What are the back of the book bollock points?
I hope so. I wish it was. It would have been better. I'd have loved it even more then, and then been even more disappointed. But no, I think for me, usually it's the games that kind of, I treasured because I didn't have many games, or because they were novel or amazing for their times. And then you come back and you go, well, now I've been spoiled and all games are shit.
Surely there is a difference between these were never good and these have been surpassed, right?
I think there's a class of game that is before its timey kind of a game where, they are really reaching, and the volume of the imagination or the kind of their ambition is great at the time. I think there are games like, I don't know, Doom, or like the Stone Colds, Tetris, whatever, which have that timelessness to it because they didn't rely particularly on amazing kind of reaching technology or amazing reaching design at the time. Or no, they were ambitious at the time, but anyway, they hold up today. But I think that Eco and particularly Shadow of the Colossus are a bit clunky now, so they don't have, they've got that in the way as well.
That is a spicy one. I'm trying to think, because I was approaching this from the point of view of game, trying to find that game that was I really thought this was good because I wanted it to be good and it wasn't really.
Because I was also thinking about Dune 2. I went back to Dune 2 and I loved that. But I can forgive it a bit more because it kind of trailblazed so many things.
Right. Well, it's often the goal of those, or the not the goal, but the effect of games that jankily push one envelope or another is to open pathway for other people to come along and do it better, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that makes them bad games in hindsight. Just that, to me, I think there's a distinct category for games that you probably wouldn't revisit, but you're glad they were there, right? You know, whereas like I think I mentioned it on the last podcast because it was a perennial thing I was obsessed with as a kid. But like I, for example, I'm really not sure how good the various like Desert Strike games are, but I loved them as a kid, right? And I think in hindsight that might not be a good formula, or maybe it's amazing. Like very frustrating top-down, limited point of view helicopter combat games is not a genre that anyone's ever made again, as far as I can tell. No one ever did that again. And maybe there's a reason for that, but I haven't revisited it either. Yeah? Am I wrong? Is Desert Strike good all the whole time? If so, why did no one do it again?
I did have the sneaking suspicion it wasn't good at the time because, here's a game where you can't see the thing that's going to kill you, but you got to go there anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, you're a helicopter, but you can only look down.
The one that would be interesting, I haven't got back to it, but it'd be interesting to go back to Ultima Underworld for me, because that was one of the first PC games I ever played, and it was completely magical at the time, but it has been surpassed in most of those ways. But at the same time, it also had it's a very particular energy, like a very particular vibe, in the sense that, you know, the descendant of it is Skyrim, but Skyrim doesn't have a dungeon that is anything like this dungeon, because Ultima Underworld was entirely a dungeon, and so the dungeon had within it things like underground rivers and little societies built into these corridors, and it just had this very like makeshift feeling, like everyone had just sort of made the best of being down there for their whole lives, and that was an interesting vibe. The one I have been back to, and it isn't, I can't remember what the phrasing in the letter was, but it isn't bad, is N. That is a game that I loved, the original N I loved at the time, and when I came to play N++, it is, you know, by all accounts better than N, and, you know, they haven't lost anything, but I have changed enough in the time since that it's no longer my cup of tea at all. Like, it feels fiddly, and it's just that kind of challenge is something I'm no longer interested in. Just like, oh, you slipped slightly off this block, next time don't do that. That used to be something that I could get really, really addicted to, trying to improve and trying to get fluid at and trying to have that satisfaction of mastery. And these days I'm just like, nah, fuck it.
Alex, I'm gonna ask for your perspective on something. Was Sonic Adventure ever good?
No, I hated that at the time.
Oh, shit. Yeah. Because I asked that because I loved that game. That's a good example. Yeah, well, I was 11 years old.
Did you buy it? Like, obviously this was on Dreamcast. It was like, and so therefore,
look,
you needed to love the Green Dreamcast. I think that it was not love for Sonic, but love for the Dreamcast that fueled that.
I loved Sonic as a kid, and I also had the deep sunk cost of a child who was being made fun of for having a Dreamcast. So it was maybe, you know, because like, I mean, none of the nerds at school were cool, but the cool ones had PlayStations, and I had a Dreamcast.
The Dreamcast was a very nice machine.
It was a beautiful machine. Thing. Exactly, right? Like, it's the kind of thing that you evangelize because you're being made fun of. And so I remember Sonic Adventure as a kind of transcendental experience. This was Mario 64, but for the better character.
It's got a killer whale in it.
It's got a killer whale in it. There is and I remember very fondly, and I've never gone back to it for obvious reasons, because I suspect it doesn't hold up, because I suspect for a ton of very good reasons. I was going to say, like, you know, purist reasons like game design. It probably doesn't hold up.
Fun.
You know, next to like the equivalent Mario games or Zelda from the same period. But the magic of getting a character I loved as a kid in 3D was enough at the time to kind of carry me through it.
I think this is the perfect example, Chris. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it might be the perfect example. I will say this. The first both Sonic Adventure games have good endings, and I think games are hard to end at the best of times. And I think Mario games cop out of the obligation to have an exciting ending by just being pretty excellent the whole way through and making you feel nice and then ending at the right time. Whereas I think in my heart of heart, I could never love a game like that. I need something that lurches towards something
steadily towards,
and I want to cheer when it lands, but like happily on its ass. You know what I mean? Like it's not gonna dazzle me. Sonic Adventure 1 ends with something all games should do, I think, regardless of genre or context, and it has a real live crowd of human beings that they hired to chant Sonic, Sonic, Sonic in the background when you're doing the last boss. I believe every single game should do that. Every single one. I defy you to name the game that wouldn't improve.
I think that to really understand that, I think you need to have played something as dispiriting as Sonic Adventure first.
What? Okay, Alex, how about this? What if Ico ended like that? Or Shadow of the Colossus?
Ico. Or
yeah.
Little boy with...
Boy that isn't the horse. Boy that isn't the horse. Honestly, it's great. And the second Sonic Adventure game ends with a rock ballad as you flip between controlling two different Sonics in space to fight a big turtle, I think. I don't fucking remember. I just remember it being the most fucking exciting thing that had ever happened to me. And I think I refuse to believe that these things were bad. Actually, you know what? I'll accept that they were bad. I'm going to be more mature about this. I accept that they were probably bad. I had a good time when I had no taste. And everything that happened since has been a mistake. He said, surrounded by the evidence that never changed.
Oh, wow. This has been cathartic.
It has been. We should probably do another question, shouldn't we? That's what I said we would do, and so I'm going to do it right now.
Is this the second half of the sixth of the half dozen of the Francis half dozen?
Yes. Whatever you just said, yes. Daniel writes, Dear Crates and Crowbars, your recent discussion of a Hood Outlaws and Legends got me wondering, does the average Brit care about Robin Hood or King Arthur? As someone from the USA, I generally perceive the choice to use them as uninspired, lazy, or driven by the fact that they're established and in the public domain. Is it different if you're from the British Isles? That's from Daniel.
No, I think we see it that way too.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
it's funny that because Robin Hood definitely exists. I know. I
don't think I've
definitely exists. No. I can't say that I've thought about Robin Hood for a long time before that game came out and sort of popped back into my head. But that at the same time, then I thought about it, and actually, Robin Hood has been a constant presence throughout my life. Like whether it was on children's TV through the Robin Hood series, comedy series, which was good, the various films and things, the feature films, Kevin Costner and whatever. He's definitely been around, but like hasn't really felt like an important part of my life through any part of it. Arthur, I think, has been there and played more of a role, I think. Weirdly enough, just today I read that that King Arthur's done a big fight in Bath, maybe.
You mean like recently we discovered that he did, or like he didn't do it yesterday, right?
He got into a barney outside Wetherspoons.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
and it's probably Albion's darkest hour, but it wasn't what we were expecting.
I was just doing some deep research into the city on Wikipedia. It said he'd done a battle, so yeah, maybe.
Well, there's also Arthur's had a better time of it lately. So Inkle's previous game, Pendragon, was Arthurian, and of course Green Knight is coming out.
Yeah, I was going to mention Green Knight.
Yeah.
Which looks real cool.
Yeah, like I think Arthurian myth particularly is so interwoven with like British folklore past a certain point that I think it kind of means something different to be like, I feel the same way about things drawing on Arthurian myth as I do about them drawing on Greek-Roman myth in some ways, and it's very familiar. Although I think well executed Arthurian myth that kind of gets to the spirit of some of those stories is so rare. That's one of the reasons I'm excited about the Green Knight. But I agree that sort of taking, Camelot or Arthurian legend as a setting for a relatively otherwise generic and kind of, Game of Thrones inspired kind of fantasy story is a bit played out. As I think, even though there's been some good work done in this in every regard, particularly for kids and for YA audiences, using Arthur as a kind of springboard for urban fantasy heroism has also been done just a few too many times. But I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I think it's interesting seeing the context of this question, as Daniel says, writing as an American, because, this is from a point of view of this is fairly ancient folklore, right? This isn't a public domain character that gets overused in the way that, perhaps Sherlock Holmes is or something like that, where you can still point to a single point of origin and a single kind of, semi-canonical interpretation of what that character is. Sherlock Holmes, King Arthur is so adaptable as a kind of, a kind of folkloric object that I think it still has potential to be remixed in interesting ways. And I think it's inevitably, I'd be interested to know because I appreciate that Robin Hood's less resonant to me, but also while I was born in the North, I didn't stay there. So I wonder if it's different if you grow up in Nottingham, for example, versus, growing up, in my case, in Wiltshire and in the West Country, where you get snippets of Arthurian folklore everywhere all the time, right? Yeah. These stories just burble around. And so, do I care when he crops up in a game in a relatively sort of anodyne fashion? No, not really. Is it sort of interesting when it gets adapted interestingly? Yes. Although I think also, I feel like those stories have such a magnetic pull that they, I would be more interested to see the other element. There are far more elements of, British, by meaning the islands, folklore that I would rather see adapted at this point as well, if that was to be the thing we were doing.
Yeah, great. I think also there's an element of, so Arthur is so much of that stuff then subsequently was absorbed into general sort of fantasy, that sort of convention that's grown up over the last century, whether through Tolkien or Tolkien.
Largely through Tolkien, yeah.
Yeah, and then Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, it's all kind of percolated through and, filtered. And so it feels like it has more relevance to games as a result, just by its natural sort of existence. Whereas I think, from my southern point of view, Robin Hood feels a lot more parochial, and therefore, I'm a little bit kind of like, here's our little Robin game world. Do you want to play our Robin game?
I feel like Robin Hood is interesting because it's like Robin Hood isn't a genre, like I would say into itself, whereas like Arthurian storytelling is. It brings so many kind of tropes and structures and things, not least the big ensemble of knights, and they're all friends and they go off on quests collectively or alone, which is basically all superhero comics. Like, to take it away from Tolkien momentarily, right? Like, you want the real first Avenger? I guess it was fucking King Arthur, wasn't it? I don't know. But you know what I mean? Like, but there's that those tropes kind of have so much resonance, whereas I think those sort of Robin Hood legend is a far more specific and singular story, and therefore, you struggle to find an adaptation that took it in a wildly different direction than Man shoot bow good, rob from rich, give to poor.
Yeah. But what a rich, you've got loads of game verbs there. Ranged and melee combat, sorted. Stealth, got it.
Give? What'd you do with give?
Loose moral justification for whatever the player wants to do.
rob from the rich and refuse the quest reward in return for a later, better reward.
Yes. That's the most virtue we're capable of as players.
That is all the questions we've got time for this evening, because it's getting late. I'm tired. If you would like to send us a question for future episodes of the podcast, you can email us. Why not? questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also find us on Twitter @crateandcrowbar. And thanks as ever to our Patreon supporters. You can find out about supporting the podcast at patreon.com/crateandcrowbar. And thank you to every one of you that does so. We have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/crateandcrowbar, where you can listen to these same podcasts while staring at an unmoving still image. We have a website, crateandcrowbar.com, wherein you'll find links to many things, including our Discord server, both of them actually at this point, including one for the Role Models Miniatures community if you want additional bangings on about Warhammer. That's where I do that. In the meantime, I have been Chris Thurston.
I've been Alex Wiltshire.
Oh! Perfect synchronicity. Normally neither of you or whoever it is commit at exactly the same time to prevent a situation where one of you stops abruptly to allow the other to continue. That was a rare example of a perfect crosstalk. Congratulations, and let's try again.
I've been Tom Francis.
Oh, he did the fast-paced, high-pitched robot voice of a man getting it in there.
I've been Alex Wiltshire.
And the sort of relaxed wizard voice of a man who knows he can take his time. Incredible. Well, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
Cool.
done.
Nice. Well, thank you for listening, everybody. I said it normal, look.
Oh no.
It was
Wasn't ready for it.
It was a stealth one.
Should we try it again?
This is where we want the
Jesus.
The communal safety of crosstalk.